Today, we're talking about this idea of vision. Who would you rather have your daughter marry, a dreamer or a visionary?
Don't even bother coming up onto the porch, dreamer.
Dreams, those happen all day long. Vision, that's totally different.
Welcome back to another episode of the Entrepreneurial Family Man podcast. I am Jamie Slingerland, here with my good friends, Chris McCluskey, Michael McGreevy, and Chris Niemeyer is probably waiting in a really long line right now.
He's at the Magic Kingdom because the family said, we're doing this. 4 kids or no, we're doing this.
We're just 3 guys today that are crazy about our wives. We love our kids, and we want to kill it in business. And we get to talk about these 3 domains every week with you guys. In the Bible, in Proverbs 29:18, it says, where there is no vision, the people perish. If you've watched any medieval movies, you know that guillotine thing where they put the head in and they drop the sword? That's what happens when people perish. We formed this group, this mastermind here called EFM, so that we could thrive together and that we could live a successful life. We definitely don't want to perish. 3 reasons that we need to have a vision. The first one is perspective. How does perspective have anything to do with vision?
Perspective or orientation, having something that you're shooting for. I was joking there at the beginning, but I was entirely serious as well. That dreams are just vague, ethereal, fuzzy things that are very pleasant. We all have lots of daydreams as well as nighttime dreams. But for the most part, they're fun things that leave us feeling good, and we toss out, wouldn't it be great if someday blah, blah, blah. But when we do the hard work of putting legs and structure to a dream, it becomes a vision that gives you a point of orientation. It allows you to gauge progress along a journey toward a particular desired outcome. So you can gain perspective. Am I gaining ground? Am I losing ground? Am I not even on the path anymore? Have I lost sight entirely of the vision? If I don't have it to begin with, I've got no orientation point. I've got no perspective. But when I do have it, there's no guarantee I'm going to succeed in it. It just gives me that reference point over and over to hem me in, pull me back on, help me combat my fleshly tendencies to putz around with things. Yeah, it's a North Star. It's a guidance kind of a thing for us.
So well said, McCluskey. And this morning, Jamie sent me a text. You know how those Facebook memories come up? Well, a 6-year memory came up for me, and it was the day that I decided to go with Jamie down to Dan Miller's place to a conference. This was my first conference ever, and I was just reflecting on those 6 years. And I didn't know exactly what it was going to look like, but I knew a couple things about my vision that helped keep perspective. I knew I wanted to make my own schedule. I knew I wanted to be free and have a flexible lifestyle. I knew I wanted to go big in marriage and family. I knew I wanted to have a business that had purpose. As I was thinking about that memory that came up, I thought, wow, I had a vision in place, and that's what sustained me. Man, were there ever ups and downs in that journey? But knowing those key pieces of that vision kept me on track. It pulled me back to focus on, oh yeah, this is why I'm doing this, because these are the things I care about the most.
On that trip down there, we were riding on those camels, right? The 3 wise men following the star. We had that North Star.
Oh man, we were a disaster. We didn't know how we were going to do it. We didn't know nearly enough to pull it off, but it led us to what we did need to know to follow through on those things.
That's a really good illustration of the whole point that we're addressing today, because I think we should be clear what we're going to try to tackle today and what we're not. We're not going to actually, in this discussion, talk through how to develop a vision. We're just talking right now about why should you have one, whatever it is, however you do it, what's the value in having it? And I love that illustration, Mike, because you said, I didn't see everything very clearly, but I saw enough of a sense of vision to know, I move in this direction. I'm going to go to a conference. I'm going to commit time. I'm going to commit energy and focus. I'm going to cancel other things that I got going on, sink some dollars into this. That conference that you two went to at Dan Miller's, since I know Dan so well, I wasn't there, but I know what they did there. They helped you explore more of what the vision could be. and usually did some exercises, some journaling, some discussion and coaching around fleshing out more of the vision.
Yeah, that was a huge inspiration because we were going on $1 and a dream when we were driving down there. When we came back, we had some legs to the vision, a few more anyway.
Yeah, so that first reason that vision's so important is that it gives you perspective. At least when you're on the road going somewhere, you know where your destination is. But it makes sense that you're traveling, that you're moving forward because you're moving on a map towards someplace and you know that you're on the right road. You're not off in the wilderness. So the second reason why every EFM dude should have a vision, this idea that we have these God-given desires to accomplish certain things, and sometimes they become so strong that we have to take action and we have to move on them because we believe so much in what we want to have accomplished in 30 years. And God has spoke that to us. I know before this call, McCluskey pulled up a big document, and he took a lot of time out back in the day when he was 32 years old, I think, to draw up this document. But I mean, God was stirring something in you, McCluskey. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was definitely the response to something that I felt being stirred up, not just within myself, but my wife, Rachel, as well. It was when we moved here to the farm. So I was 34 when we moved here, and Rachel and I had spent a tremendous number of hours, windshield time on dates, as well as what we called tea time back then. We would sit, because we had little babies, we would just sit at home, but we'd make a pot of sleepy time tea and just sit and talk long into the night about the dreams that we both had, comparing notes on the dreams, and then talking about, well, now which pieces of that should become for our family vision. Okay, then if that's going to be vision, when do we want that to happen? Let's plug that into a time frame. Oh, and how old are the kids going to be? What will they be needing at that point? Where would that kind of a thing happen? How can we go about that? What do we need to be putting in place now? So we would just toss out scads of coaching type questions, and we would nail down answers to those. That eventually resulted in a clear enough vision that, gosh, I mean, we sold our house and closed my very successful counseling practice and said goodbye to our church and loved ones and everything, and moved out here to this very derelict.
It's the word of the week. The word of the week.
Here to this very derelict farm at the time. And the document you were referring to, of course, is the vision document that we developed once we got here to the farm. After we sounded everything out and we're here for about 9 months, to our delight, it wasn't just we who moved. Some of my siblings, both of my siblings ultimately, eventually moved to other sections of this many hundred acres farm here. We're not on top of each other, but they loved the idea. And my folks eventually came on. So we started writing out a written structure for all of us on the farm, all of the families. What's your vision? Those are illustrations of listening to something that every single one of us has within us, and that is, your phrase for it, Jamie, was a God-given thing. There are gifts, there are callings, there are unique qualities about each of us that God says He put into us before He knew us together in our mother's womb. He knew us, and those giftings and callings are irrevocable, but there's nothing that tells us that we're necessarily going to discern them, or even if we discern them, we're going to act on them. That's our piece. That is vision. And so this vision work it's putting feet to those dreams until they become a very clear destination with markers and goals and calendar dates and budgets and all the things that'll make it happen.
I love it. God had planted those dreams and those desires in you, and you actually did the work and move forward. Before we move on, we have to just make note that the word of the week is derelict. So can you... what's the origin of that? Is that Latin or what, McCluskey?
Derelict. That's great. Yeah. Usually when we use the word, we're referring to somebody who's like a drunk, a bum, somebody who's just burned out on life. Oh, he's a derelict. But it really refers to anything that's in horribly bad shape. So it can be a human being, or in this case, it was
the farm. Yeah.
Bad. It was bad. We had to finally just tear down 9 different outbuildings and such. They were beyond repair. And it was a mess. Yes, that's derelict.
Great one. It's encouraging to me that we don't have to come up with a vision out of thin air. That when we're created, God put these specific desires and hopes in us. And yeah, He may not reveal them in completion before our eyes. He doesn't hand us this silver platter with our dreams on them. But if we are willing to dig into those and talk about them, write about them, explore them, test them out, start to organize them and pursue them until they become more clear. That's such an encouragement to me, because I know that oftentimes I have dreams and they're all over the place. Like one day it'll be, I think I want to do this, or then the next day it'll be something completely different. I'm encouraged by that.
I was just thinking about how early on in our marriage, me and Ruthie, about 6 or 7 years in, we were really struggling financially. And what happened is that personally moved from just having a dream of being debt-free to actually creating a vision where, just like you, Michael, the two of us going to Dan Miller's, we had that North Star where we sat down and we created a budget, which was a document. It was actually our vision plan to being on the same page and paying off that debt. It really changed everything for me, shifting just that hope of, hey, honey, let's get out of debt. How are we going to do that? Well, we need to sit in it and think about it and really ask God, how could we do that when you lack beliefs? I mean, that's my personal testimony. First time that I moved out of that dreamer stage into a visionarying.
Jamie, that story, that I mean, you tell it frequently, and it always inspires me. Every time I hear you talk about where you guys were and the way that the two of you together pulled together, you had to have had conflicts. You had to have had tension and tears around that mess. And you allowed it to drive you together, and the two of you got a really clear picture of where you wanted to be instead of where you were, and what it was going to take from both of you to get there. And you knocked it out in like a relatively short period of time. But that's a perfect example of taking a dream or a desire. Wouldn't it be nice if we were debt-free? And saying, no, we are going to be debt-free. I can see that clearly, and we're going to talk until we get a clear path. Why is it important for us to have a vision? Because they're in there. They've been given to us already. They're not going to be taken back. Irrevocable means irrevocable. It ain't going back. It's just, are you going to do anything with it? But we all know in our faith that when we get to the end of this life, we step across, it's just the end of the beginning. We've got all the rest of eternity. Hello. Like we never die, you know?
Yeah.
And we're going to be judged according to what you have done. It's like, well, what was I supposed to be doing, Lord? You didn't tell me. I don't think that's going to fly. I'd be like, yeah, I did. I wrote it in the fabric of your being. My fingerprints are all over you. Your passions, those dreams, those desires, those hopes, those longings, not for ungodly stuff, obviously, but that stirring of the Spirit, that is Him speaking to us. And if we try to argue that we didn't know, I didn't know I was supposed to be doing that, baloney.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the parable of the talents really lays that out pretty clearly, right? The guy that pretty much did that, he put his hands up and said, well, I didn't know, or I thought you were going to be harsh if I made a poor decision or I made a mistake. And he didn't get treated kindly because he was conservative, that's for sure. Lydia and I were really blessed, and not too long ago, pay off our house. We could have said, hey, this is great. We can just hang out here, just cruise through the rest of life, enjoy it. But I just know that we both feel like we have a bigger vision to live out. God placed that in both of us. And as we talk about it, it just wasn't enough to just ride the wave out through the rest of our lives. That's why we moved into purchasing this other property. A big expense. There's a lot of time that's going to go into that. There's a lot of planning that goes into that.
I got to see it this week, and man, he's got a lot of work to do.
It's derelict, right?
No, well, I actually went in there and I was like, isn't this awesome? And you know what's happened with McGreevy? The optimism has kind of fizzled a little bit because he spent weeks and weeks being in there just looking at, you can look up and see the second floor at some spots because there's no floors. You need to keep that vision top of mind, McGreevy, so that you smile as you're swinging the hammer, knowing what's going to happen.
That's exactly right. And that's not to take it backward, but that is perspective, because that's coming. When you take a risk and you take on a big part of your vision, you step into it, hard times are coming, challenges are coming. And if we can't step back and take a look at that overall vision, I'm going to be so frustrated. I'm going to want to quit and throw in the towel. So the vision is sustaining me through these tough times as I'm pushing to finish this project.
I love it. So we've talked about that perspective, being on the road, knowing where you're going, like McGreevy in his house, and then taking these ideas and passions that God's put in your heart, and you can actually doing something like what you said, McCluskey, instead of just hoping. Let's talk about reason number 3, why we ought to have a vision. having a vision works. If you want to have success, this is the surefire way to get it. Either one of you guys could jump in here. Something that would never have worked if you didn't have a vision.
Can we talk about everything that I've done? Because I am a feeler. So when I encounter resistance and pain, especially as a 7 on the Enneagram, I don't like that feeling. And it causes me to think, how can I step away from this pain? And if that's all I have, if I don't have a vision in place, I'm sunk. Let's talk about my coaching business. There's times when it was really hard. I was balancing kids and I still am. I'm balancing working from home and trying to make everything work. And there's up months and down months. When I'm feeling a down month, if I'm just going based on how I feel or how the market looks at that time, I'm throwing in the towel. I'm out of there. But if I can look at the vision, and I often do this, I'll call up Jamie or Chris and say, hey, I'm just in this spot. I'm struggling. I feel like quitting. Should I go back and do construction? They're there to remind me and help me see that, hey, you have an amazing family. You have an awesome marriage. You have the opportunity to build your business. You know more now today. You've experienced more today than you ever have in your whole life. You are set to continue to live out this vision. And so I'm pulled back to see the bigger picture and the vision, and it immediately inspires me and charges me up to get back in the game and put my hand to the plow and get back to it.
As I was thinking about this idea of outcome and success and actually making a plan, I hate planning. It's easier for me just to go and do something and feel like I'm moving forward than to actually make a plan. And I learned this as a teacher. One of my mentors came to me and told me that if I would spend 15 minutes at the end of the day planning out the next day, that it could save me a couple hours. And you know what? It wasn't that stressful once I got started, but there was always a resistance to just sit down and actually make a plan. It almost felt like I was being lazy or not working, because it's easier to shuffle things and get moving and get your feet moving and just feel the momentum than actually sit down, strategize, and think. I sabotage myself by not doing the hard work of creating a vision or creating a plan, because I'd just rather move forward with random acts of something because I feel productive doing that.
Yeah, in the moment, it feels good, doesn't it? But I love the reference that you made to building a house, and that we wouldn't think about literally building a house from the ground up, leveling the ground and roughing in the plumbing and then pouring the pad and all the rest of it. You wouldn't think about doing that without a very clearly drawn out architectural plan. That takes a heck of a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of tweaking and adjusting, and no, not that way, this way, and recalculating what the costs are going to be. But we naturally do that. We dread it, but we wouldn't think about building the house and not doing that work. That's just a given. Well, come on, that's just a physical structure. It's a house. We might even move into it and then sell it later, not live there all of our days. Here we're talking about our lives and a vision that is clearly written out. Where is it we're trying to go to? What is our vision for the raising of these kids, the launching of these kids, the ability for us to stay involved in these kids' lives as they have children of their own, the whole courtship process as they look toward who they might marry, the assistance that we might provide to them in looking at colleges and looking at entrepreneurial ventures and everything that goes into life. We're not going to do some hard work of writing some of that down, calendaring some of that, budgeting for some of that. It's when you talk about it like that, you realize the insanity of it. And yet I bet that probably less than 10% of people ever write out a vision for life or marriage or even, frankly, some of their entrepreneurial ventures.
Wow. I resonate with what you're saying so deeply, Chris. And what you shared, Jamie, I struggle with that too. That quote about sharpening your axe helps pull me back into that visioning and planning. Abe Lincoln said, if I had to cut down a tree, I would spend 6 hours sharpening the axe and 1 hour actually cutting down the tree. It speaks to that importance of having a plan and a vision before you execute on something.
We don't want to be in that group of 90% of the population just living life with their head down. We want to be wide-eyed, looking forward, knowing where we're going. So what about you? What about you?
What about you?
So what about you? Are you moving along on the journey without a vision? Well, now is the time to consider having a vision. This is so important. Your life matters. You're leading your family, you're leading your business, and you need a vision. Take some time, get in a quiet spot, and really start thinking about what this vision could look like. Start a draft. So we encourage you to start on that journey of having a powerful vision for your life, your family, and your business.
Thank you for listening to the Entrepreneurial Family Man Podcast. Visit efmlife.com to connect with us and others like you who are pursuing success in enterprise, family, and marriage.